Thank you, Madam Chair. As this committee has investigated transportation incidents from the derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, to the depressurization incident on Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, a common refrain from parties to NTSB investigations is that they need advance approval from the NTSB prior to providing documents and information to members of Congress. Madam Chair, is that true?
That is not true.
As you know, this committee has significant oversight, authority, and responsibility. Does the NTSB's confidentiality agreement with parties to NTSB investigations restrict access by members of Congress to documents and information in any way?
Absolutely not. And parties should not use the NTSB as a shield.
Thank you for clarifying. I agree, but that is important to have that on the record, so I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You have a right to that information and should get that information.
Thank you. Turning specifically to Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, I am deeply concerned about potential safety issues with the Boeing 737 MAX 9. It is essential that the NTSB's investigation get to the bottom of this and identify any safety issues and potential solutions. To that end, it is equally important that the parties to the investigation cooperate fully with the NTSB, with Congress, and others investigating the incident. Madam Chair, how cooperative have the parties to the investigation been with the NTSB, and have you gotten timely access to the documents, the information, and the witnesses you need?
There are a number of parties to the investigation. Some parties have been very cooperative. For example, the Federal Aviation Administration. Boeing has not provided us with the documents and information that we have requested numerous times over the past few months, specifically with respect to opening, closing, and removal of the door, and the team that does that work at the Renton facility.
Wow. Are you telling us that even 2 months later, you still do not know who actually opened the door plug?
That's correct, Senator. We don't know, and it's not for lack of trying. It's not unusual that we don't get information immediately in an investigation. I can point to numerous investigations where this occurs, and it takes months and months to get information. But for this one, it's 2 months later. We know for a fact that there is a team that deals with the doors in Renton. There's an entire team of 25 people and a manager. The manager has been out on medical leave. We've not been able to interview that individual. We've asked for the names of the other 25 people, have not received the names. We've asked for the records with respect to what occurred. We've asked for what shift it occurred on. We think we know what days the work occurred on, but that's only because of our investigators' work looking at pictures and emails to try to get to the bottom of that information. We don't have the records. We don't have the names of the 25 people that is in charge of doing that work in that facility. It's absurd that 2 months later, we don't have that. Our investigators right now are at the Renton facility, and they are conducting interviews. Those started on Sunday, and they will continue for the rest of the week. One example, while we were out there, we investigated both the Spirit Aerospace employees that did the work on the rivets, while we don't know who did the work on the door plug. For the Spirit Aerospace employees, we were just informed last week, they're actually not Spirit Aerospace employees, they're contractors. They work for 3 different contracting firms, Aerotech, Strom Aviation, and Launch. All 3 are in the state of Washington. All 3 people work for 3 different entities for Spirit Aerospace. Those were not told to us by Spirit Aerospace. That information was told to us through the individuals who were being interviewed that contacted us directly. So we have engaged our attorney on this matter, just so you're aware.
Well, I will say that is utterly unacceptable. And the parties who are being investigated by NTSB need to cooperate fully. And Congress expects them to cooperate fully because you have an obligation to the American public to get to the bottom of what happened. Today is March 6th. I'm going to ask you to inform this committee in writing 1 week from today whether or not Boeing has cooperated and I expect you to have that list of 25 names. And so I'm going to ask you a week from today to inform this committee in writing whether they provided those 25 names or not, because this investigation needs to get to the bottom of what occurred and what caused that accident.
Thank you. I will provide that to the committee in writing. The 25 names, it's not just the 25 names. We'd also like to get, and we've repeatedly requested from Boeing, the documentation that went along with the work of opening the door plug, closing the door plug, or any sort of removal, if that exists.
So please include that information as well when you respond in writing a week from today to let us know the level of cooperation you're seeing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States sets the benchmark for flight safety, and by arguably the most important measure, 2023 was a remarkably safe year for aviation, with no fatal accidents or hull losses for commercial jet aircraft. Flying commercial remains the safest way to travel, but understandably, recent incidents have left the flying public worried. The perception is things are getting worse. The public wants the Federal Aviation Administration and Congress to confront perceived risks in order to restore confidence for flyers. That brings me to the topic of today's hearings, the FAA's Organization Designation Authorization Program. ODA is important to the future of aviation safety, as well as to American competitiveness. I appreciate the work of our congressionally appointed expert panel, which reviewed Boeing's ODA for transport airplanes. Congress established this panel in the aftermath of the tragic crashes of Lion Air Flight 610 in 2018 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in 2019, in which 346 people tragically lost their lives. The panel's final report was released in February, and 3 of its members are here with us today. Welcome. As a brief aside, I want to, in particular, acknowledge that one of our witnesses, Dr. Javier de Luis, lost his sister on Flight 302. Dr. de Luis, please accept my sincere condolences and thank you for continuing to speak out on an issue that I know has grieved you and your family personally. I also want to recognize the other families that are here today, remembering their loved ones whose lives were lost on those 2 tragic accidents. Discussing ODA and what changes may be needed is critical, and I welcome this conversation. It is worth noting, however, that the FAA is still implementing the Aircraft Certification Safety and Accountability Act, this committee's response to the MAX 8 crashes. It has not even fully implemented the 2018 FAA Authorization Act, even as we are currently negotiating the current reauthorization. While it is clear that Boeing's culture and safety management needs drastic improvement, we should not rush to legislate just for the sake of legislating. To that point, I look forward to engaging with today's witnesses, all of whom deserve our appreciation and thanks for their hard work on this effort. Their report was a consensus product, issued without any dissenting views, which all of us in Congress can appreciate is no small accomplishment. And I hope to better understand their recommendations and how Congress can work to improve aviation safety in a targeted and effective manner. While discussing ODA and Boeing's safety culture is important, the flying public is also acutely worried about why pieces of Boeing airplanes are falling from the sky. The experts panel report specifically noted that the panel was not directed to investigate or provide recommendations towards specific airplane incidents or accidents, which occurred prior to or during the expert panel's work. In addition to today's hearing, I believe we also need to hear from the FAA and from Boeing itself about episodes like Alaska Airlines Flight 1282. Our committee needs to understand not only Boeing's ODAs, but the specific production missteps that caused the January incident. And we need to hear from Boeing directly about the company's safety culture and safety management writ large. The public will want to know what changes Boeing is making to restore confidence in its brand. Boeing is a great American company with a great history and great legacy, and we all want Boeing to be successful. But when accountability is needed, and it clearly is here, we should not hesitate to demand answers. And for Boeing to succeed going forward, those answers need to be given and changes need to be made to ensure that safety is central. When each of us, when our families, when our children get on an airplane, we want to trust that we're going to land safely. That's the topic of this hearing, and I hope subsequent hearings as well. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you holding today's hearing on this critically important topic, FAA's oversight of aviation manufacturers. I want to thank Administrator Whitaker for appearing before us today, especially as his agency is busy implementing the bipartisan, bicameral FAA Reauthorization Act that this committee authored and passed just last month. Our crucial bipartisan legislation gives the FAA much-needed long-term stability and allows it to refocus on its primary mission, the safety of our national aviation system. It directs the FAA to conduct risk-based inspections of manufacturers like Boeing to ensure that there is no repeat of the Alaska Airlines incident. Further, it provides FAA with important tools for developing a workforce with the technical know-how necessary to overseeing complex aircraft manufacturers. And it includes key protections for whistleblowers who play an important role in the aviation system so that employees can speak out freely when raising safety concerns. On January 5th of this year, just minutes into its trip, Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 experienced a rapid cabin decompression at 16,000 feet when a plug door flew off the plane. Thankfully, miraculously, the pilots landed the plane safely with no critical injuries. We are very fortunate that no passengers were seated in the seat next to the plug door, and the plane was still climbing to its cruising altitude. Had either of these factors been different, the results would have been catastrophic. The aircraft in question was a Boeing 737 MAX 9, delivered to Alaska Airlines just a few months prior. For many of us, it raised concerns once again of the safety of Boeing aircraft. In the weeks that followed, the NTSB accident investigation and the FAA's audit discovered unsettling details about Boeing's production lines. Reports from airlines of untightened bolts or over-tightened bolts on Boeing 737 MAX aircraft have borne the phrase from passengers, "If it's a Boeing, I ain't going." That's not good. Even more alarming, NTSB stated the reason the plug door flew off the aircraft was because an employee at the Boeing facility opened the plug door and forgot to put the bolts back in. Such a fundamental lapse in the production line is inexcusable and should never have happened. I was very glad to see that the FAA took swift action to ground the 737 MAX after the accident. However, I remain concerned that the FAA's oversight of Boeing failed to spot serious production gaps. The FAA, through their oversight of manufacturers, is responsible for ensuring that when a passenger gets on a plane, he or she can have the utmost confidence in that plane's safety. The FAA must guarantee that not only are they certifying that an aircraft is safely designed, but that the manufacturer is building them to that safe design. Clearly, that was not always happening at Boeing. Today, we're going to hear from Administrator Whitaker on what actions the FAA is taking to ensure their oversight of Boeing's production prevents further mishaps. I'm interested in hearing his impressions of Boeing's actions in response to the FAA's audits of the Boeing production line. It is clear that the safety culture at Boeing needs to be reinforced, something that doesn't happen overnight. I look forward to hearing on the FAA's long-term efforts to ensure that Boeing is following through on its improvement plan. The safety of the flying public is vital, and it is our job to ensure the FAA and Boeing are taking safety responsibilities seriously. I hope that we will hear directly from Boeing about how they are going to address production failures. I understand that Boeing's CEO, Dave Calhoun, will be appearing very soon before the U.S. Senate, but I'm disappointed it will not be before this committee. We have a responsibility as the Committee of Jurisdiction for Civil Aviation to conduct oversight on these matters, and I trust that we will hear very soon from Boeing senior leadership. Boeing is a great American company, and it is critically important for our nation that Boeing remain strong and continue producing excellent aircraft. These safety lapses have caused serious questions in the flying public about the safety of Boeing's planes. And it is critical for Boeing, it's critical for the FAA, and it's critical for this committee that those safety lapses be corrected and corrected promptly. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, did Senator Moran, did you want to make a statement?
No, Chairman and Ranking Member, I'll forego that, but I consider this one of the most important hearings that we have lots of important hearings. This is a very important hearing, and I'm pleased that you're conducting it.
Thank you. Administrator Whitaker, thank you again for joining us. Please proceed with your statement.
Thank you, Chair Cantwell and Ranking Member Cruz, committee members, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss the agency's oversight of Boeing's production and manufacturing. Really good progress. With respect to the service to Burlington, I think that was largely a reduction because we've reduced capacity on the East Coast corridor by 10% because of staffing problems, specifically in New York. We are in the process of moving some of that airspace to Philadelphia. That's been a long process, but we're hoping to have that cut over in July, end of July. And Philadelphia is a very healthy facility, so we should be able to staff up much more effectively there. So it's going to take some time to get that elephant through the boa, but we think it's going to be a solution to this problem.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to commend you on a good start in your new job, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Administrator Whitaker.
Morning, sir.
Welcome. In March, during my questioning of NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamady, when she appeared before this committee, she told me that Boeing was missing key documents and records about the specific MAX 9 aircraft involved in the Alaska Airlines Flight 1282. Has your investigation determined whether the documents specific to that MAX 9 plane, whether they even exist?
That is part of our overall investigation of this incident, and my understanding is that is true, that they do not exist.
If I understand correctly, the security camera footage was overwritten. Boeing doesn't know who performed work on the door plug, and no paperwork exists. Is that all right?
That is my understanding.
That seems remarkable and shocking. Is there concern at the FAA that an employee at Boeing is hiding key information about this?
That investigation is ongoing, and I know the Justice Department has a separate investigation underway. So I think too early to have an opinion about that, but we will thoroughly investigate those circumstances.
Prior to the MAX crashes, Boeing was a storied company with a rich history of building the best and the safest planes in the world. During the pandemic, Boeing conducted employee buyouts and involuntary layoffs. Once travel picked up and airplane orders resumed, Boeing hired to fill the workforce gap. According to a Wall Street Journal article published this week, of the more than 30,000 Boeing employees represented by one of the unions, roughly half have less than 6 years' experience. That is double the level before the pandemic. During your investigation, to what extent has the inexperience of engineers or inspectors contributed to some of the observations made in the FAA's audit?
I think significantly, and I would say that this lack of transfer of knowledge from early retirements and the impact of COVID has been a risk throughout the aviation ecosystem. And I think the better companies have used their SMS system to identify the risk and put specific programs in place to mitigate that, either bringing retired employees back to monitor, giving more training, or having fewer requirements for new employees. Boeing did not have a program like that in place, and that is a gap that was identified and is part of the new plan.
That same Wall Street Journal article went on to say that Boeing executives, quote, didn't realize the extent of the knowledge loss until after the Alaska accident. What requirements will the FAA impose on Boeing to compensate for the inexperience on the factory floor?
So the plan includes a number of employee-specific initiatives focused on training, increasing the amount of training, but also their instructions and installation protocols are extraordinarily complex, and they've recognized that. So they're going through a process to simplify, and then they're going to be able to measure proficiency of employees to perform tasks. So that is a part of the KPI measurements that we'll be looking at.
In January, you announced that Boeing would not be allowed to produce more than 38 MAX 9 aircraft each month. Right now, Boeing's producing around 32 each month. My top priority in this regard, as is yours, is ensuring that these planes are safe. But we also want Boeing to be competitive worldwide. What metrics will Boeing have to meet in order for it to be able to make more planes?
So there are a variety of metrics. There are the 5 or 6 KPIs that we'll be monitoring. Those are up and running. We are establishing what is the green zone, what is the yellow zone, and what is red. So those need to stay in the green zone while they're increasing production. And then we have progress that we're monitoring on the other elements of the plan, the rollout of tool management systems and training and things of that nature. And we will measure that through the audit. So it'll be a combination of those factors. We'll be able to watch that as they start to increase production from the current level and make an evaluation as they get to that 38 number.
As you know, the Boeing MAX airplane crashes in 2018 and 2019 shocked and scared pilots and passengers alike. Boeing made terrible mistakes that killed hundreds of people and shattered the company's reputation. Likewise, the FAA was caught flat-footed with shoddy oversight. In this latest crisis of confidence, what is the FAA doing differently to hold itself accountable for the oversight the agency is required to conduct?
So it's a good question and a fair question, and I think we have been too much in reactive mode, waiting for some event to occur and analyzing the events to find out what to do differently. So we're shifting to a much more proactive approach. So on the manufacturing side, it's introducing inspectors and coming up with clear indices to monitor performance. We're also taking a look at our own risks, including controllers, which is why we did this fatigue study, and we're building in more rest for schedules that shouldn't have existed, frankly, before. And really the ultimate goal is to get to data and to get the data that we can analyze up front to try to see these things before they happen. And that's not an easy lift, but it is achievable, and that's going to be really one of my main focuses going forward.
Thank you.